off of the swings! Hello. It is I. Welcome back to podcast. I don't even know where that came from.
I don't know, but it was good.
I hope that's on. Yeah.
Oh, definitely on. That's how we're going in on this one.
My headphones were unplugged. I didn't even know what was going on. We back. We out here. This is the Life Podcast. I don't even know if we have a run-up, but my name's Benjamin. I'm here with Eric.
What's up?
And Tyler.
What up?
And this is what we do. This is season 2. That's it. That's pretty much it.
This is what we do.
This is what we do.
This is season 2.
This is how we do it. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Silence.
Absolutely. Okay, so I guess we're just going to jump right in. That makes it easier.
Well,
So
you have a story to
I do
tell
have a
us, so
story.
I'm excited to hear it.
So I was at work the other day. I was at
That was a great story.
Yeah. So I was at work the other day, and this guy who I work with, he's telling this story about his neighbor. He gives him sweetbread, and we live in a Portuguese community. This person's from like Pennsylvania or whatever, and he just moved here a couple of years ago.
Okay.
So he's like, he gets this sweetbread from his neighbor, and his wife cuts it up, and he's like eating it, and then he's all like, "Oh, it's a bit crunchy." He's like, "What? Like, what's up with this bread? It's like a bit crunchy." And he's like, "Oh," he's like, he pulls out like this piece of egg, like the shell of the egg, like in his. He's like, "What is this?" And then he goes through the whole process. He's like, "I didn't know they put eggs in the bread." And I was all like, and his wife just cut through the egg, and I had a bunch of questions just from that one experience. I was like, 1, how did you not feel that you were cutting through an egg?
2, how did you not see the egg sticking out of the bread?
Yeah. Just like, whole group of questions. But then like after the whole conversation was done, I kind of like sat back down at my desk, and I was like, you know, it is kind of weird that we put eggs in bread.
Well, for all our non-Portuguese listeners, that sweet bread, basically they'll bake a loaf of bread that's sweet. Oh, sweet bread, you know.
Yeah.
Innovative.
This is mind-blowing. Continue.
Hold on. Wait, there's more. And what they'll do is they'll hard-boil an egg.
Yeah.
And then they'll just take it and like right before the bread gets... Benji's already roaring. You take it and you stick it in like the middle of the bread, so you can like you have a full hard-boiled egg, shell and all, in the middle of the bread.
Yeah.
I wonder if it would be weirder if there wasn't a shell. Like if it
was just like a shell,
loose.
Yeah, just a boiled egg with no shell. That would be strange.
I don't know. Everything's pretty.
I mean, I don't know. I don't know if it'd be stranger. We're already
So my thing was all like, well, okay, so like let's take this to a different place. It's like if I bought a loaf of bread at like Stop and Shop and there was like an orange in it. Like I wouldn't have expected that. Like I would be like, why is there an orange in my loaf of bread? You know?
Yo, that's one of those things that we take for granted because we're from here. So like we've seen that since we were children. Like if I saw sweetbread I'll ask for egg. I'm like, where's the egg? But like, cause someone coming from Pennsylvania, they've never seen that before, and they kind of just like sit down. You just go to cut a normal piece of bread,
yeah,
and you just get like.
Exactly. And that kind of just sparked the whole conversation of like, it's only normal because you've done it before or because you were like part of that.
Yeah.
It's like, no, I don't expect random bread to have stuff in it. But now I know that this specific type of bread sometimes has eggs in it.
Yeah.
So it's like, okay, like that's completely normal to me. I'd be like, oh yeah, of course. Like there's an egg. Like, but it's like our day-to-day lives. Like somebody does something and we're like, that's weird. And it's like, it's only weird because we don't do it, you know?
Yeah, absolutely. Even like the concept of like, we can keep going with the Portuguese thing, like steak and eggs, you know, and French fries. If here, that's a normal dinner. But like steak and eggs, if you're having that, like at best, that's breakfast everywhere else. At best, you know, and it's definitely not like a late night meal. And that's just something that it's just a part of our culture. Like we put eggs with everything apparently. That's just what the Portuguese people do. We had a lot of chickens running around.
Yeah. It was cheap.
It's cheap. Yeah, it's
absolutely.
True. Or you think of like in England, they do like jellied eels or whatever it
yeah,
is.
and eel pie.
Yeah, they do a lot with eels, and it's like to us in American culture, like me specifically, I don't know if anybody likes eels. I would not do jellied eels. Like that's just like a no.
If they didn't call it jellied, I'd at least be excited about it.
It's like, I want some Jello with eels. It's
Let me
like,
just slap some of that on a piece of toast.
yeah,
Yeah,
exactly. But like again, now the thing, like this train of thought continued and said like, okay, it's not necessarily that like everybody is right in the way that they do things. I think that there's obviously things that are wrong because like somebody can say like, oh, I launder money. Like that's just the way that I live my life. It's weird because you don't do it. And it's like, no, that's not true because that's illegal. You know, we don't do that.
Is it illegal?
To launder money.
Continue.
I was like, what, Eric? But like, you know, it's like there's a clear line between, okay, this is not legal and that's not legally allowed, and you just don't do this thing, so it's just not normal for you, and that's why you think it's weird.
Well, there's a lot of things. The way people grow up, a lot of people think it's normal. If you take Portuguese culture again, but it's not even Portuguese culture. It could be any culture. When you live in a toxic environment, you come to accept toxic as normal because that's all you know. You eat bologna sandwich your whole like you. We'll back it up. You eat peanut butter and jelly every day for your whole life. That's normal. Someone comes and gives you a bologna sandwich, which is trash. You're like, oh my god, this is great.
Yeah, stick with the peanut butter.
I can't beat this, but it's like, oh, this is so much better. But now you can see that like families who they scream at each other all day in the house, and they talk to even like normal talking is screaming at each other. It's like, what do you mean that's not normal?
Yeah, absolutely. You go into other people, like you talk to other people, and that's just a normal part of your conversation where you just extremely talk loud.
Well, you ever have a friend like you can talk to them and we'd be talking normal, and then you like end up rolling up in their house somewhere and they're like screaming at their parents, and their parents are screaming back at them. It's like, yo, like what's going on here? It's like, oh no, that's just how we talk.
yeah. I do remember a few times of that, of like just friends from high school and stuff. You end up at their house and no, it's just like normal conversation of like, you know, don't forget the bread kind of thing, and it's just screaming it. It's like the louder you go, like if you don't talk loud, you don't get hurt in that house, and that's like a very interesting concept because then you take that and you think it's normal, and then you have conversations with normal people, and all of a sudden you're screaming at everyone.
Yeah, and I think that it's there's a specific example that I'm thinking about. Like when my parents owned the pawn shop, there was this guy who always used to come in, and he was one of my dad's friends. He's still one of my dad's friends. He used to come in, and he just screamed every sentence that he said. It's like it was like he would just operate at like 8 decibels above everybody else, and it's just like we would be in the store having a normal conversation. He'd just be screaming, and then like a customer would come in and be like, "Why is this guy so mad?" And it's like, no, he's just screaming. It's perfectly fine.
Normal.
It's a weird environment, that store, but nonetheless, the people.
I've only heard a couple of like stories about that store, but like there are some experiences you've been through, Benji.
Oh, Eric's never been down to the pawn shop.
I've driven by, but I haven't been in it. No.
Oh no! Oh man, it was crazy. But the people made it. The people made it an experience.
It was a cast of characters.
Oh yeah, it was a group. But yeah, it's like, and I think that's the thing that a lot of people disregard, where it's like the developmental part of that thing. It's like when we were young, we saw sweetbread with eggs in it. So because the adults in our lives thought it was normal, we just assumed that it was normal. So now, as adults, we go and interact with this egg in this bread, and we don't have an issue with it. But then this older gentleman comes and is like, you guys are insane for putting eggs in bread. Like, who puts eggs in bread?
With shells on.
With the shells on, even more so, which I think it's probably better than the shells on it. But nonetheless, and you come in and he's like, what are you doing? Why are you doing this thing? Because his environment wasn't the same as ours.
Yeah.
We can get deep right away now. You can see that, and I've seen a lot of failed relationships and failed marriages work because somebody comes out of a toxic household and they think that is normal, so they expect their spouse to live up to that toxic environment, which they were taught that husband and wife dynamic or whatever family life dynamic looked like that, which is completely toxic. The other person could be fine and like completely right, trying to harbor a good family, but it's like, no, you didn't live up to the toxic expectations that had been set. And I mean, it's not that person's fault. It's generations and generations of, well, my grandfather was like this to my grandmother, and my mother was like this to my father. So it has that's love. That's normal.
Yeah. And that's why it's like so important to like before like committing into things to get all the details. You got to get all the information. You have to meet the family and stuff like that's a very important part of committing in a relationship, because this is what that person was raised by. This is like most of what we do as humans is products of who we were raised by. You know what I mean? All of our habits, and like especially when we're like going into adulthood, all the habits of that you have were developed in childhood, usually by either your decisions, a lot of them are, but your parents' decisions and how they chose to raise you. If you're in a household that was loud and they yelled a lot, then chances are you have a bad habit of yelling. You know what I mean? And that's just, you think it's normal, and it's not your fault. It's really not. It's just becoming aware of those things. That's why it's so important to meet this other person's family, so that you get an idea of like, and you can't judge them, but at least you're aware of where these things stem from.
And the tough part is that everybody thinks they're right.
Yeah,
because like if you're brought up in an environment where like let's say yelling is normal, you assume that everybody yells.
And that's the truth.
So
that's the truth to you.
Yeah, that's the truth to you. Exactly. It's like this is the information that you've been given, so you develop a style of interaction that is based off of that information. Yeah. So now you're going to go yell at your new significant other. Let's use it in this context. And it's like your new significant other is like, that's not okay. Like, we're not going to be screaming at each other. And then you have to convince the other person that they're wrong. And that's a very difficult position because humans don't like to be wrong.
Yeah.
It's like if you use like the funny little like masa example, like the sweetbread example, it's like this guy tries to convince me that I'm wrong by putting eggs in bread. And I'm like, guy, no, it's just eggs and bread. And it's like, there's no real like weight to this. But if you scale it up to something that actually matters, it's like you can have a toxic relationship because of the things that you lived with in the past. And it's like, and also, if you're in a position where you say, okay, that person's wrong, you also have to accept that you can also be wrong too.
Oh, yeah.
Because this person's going to say, no, you just need to toughen up and start screaming too. Which is completely logical from their perspective.
Right.
Yeah, absolutely. This is good stuff. And there's like so many different examples that we could use for this too. Like, and I like going back to the relationship part because I think that's the most real and tangible thing, because I think that a lot of like problems in relationships, even with friendships, like any type of relationship with other human beings, I think a lot of it stems from habits that were developed in their past that you're not even aware of, Go ahead.
No, you use the example of humans, but animals too. Like Tyler has a dog who's very, very well trained. Like that's one of the big things, It's like you can tell the difference between a dog who's been trained very well and very poorly.
Yeah.
And they just interact differently. And that's something that, like, even if you, like, okay, you don't want to look at the big scope of humans, like, because there's a lot of outside variables, but, like, you look at this kind of sanitary example of a dog, where it's all, like, the only interaction that you have with the dog is the owner, or the majority of it is the owner. The dog is a direct correlation to how the owner treats it, because it only knows what the owner is saying.
Yep.
So, like, if Tyler gives its dog commands in a certain way, just because it knows how to do it that way doesn't mean that I can go and give it a different command and it'll understand what I'm saying. It's a different environment, and we can't judge the dog based off of not understanding the commands that it wasn't brought up with.
That's really good, actually.
All this is really good. This got heavy real quick.
This is really early into this, guys. But yeah, no, that's absolutely true. I love how you brought it down to a dog concept, because it's like it does simplify it quite a bit. But it's the same idea. Like, we're just at the very core of the being. It's very similar to us, especially as children, as we're growing up. You're only raised in that one environment. If you raise a dog in an aggressive environment and you constantly I don't want to say attack it, but abuse it in a way. You can see it. You know what I mean? That dog will interact differently with other dogs or with other people. It'll always be afraid. There's a reason why, like, saved dogs, like they look very skittish because they were abused for so long, and that's the only thing they know. So every human that they come in contact with is seen as a problem.
Listen, people too. There are people like if you go and like you're gonna swat a fly and you raise your hand and everything, the dog flinches and the person flinches too. It's like, oh my god.
No, but it's like, no, that is serious. Wait. If you're around people and you raise your hand and everyone flinches, there's probably a reason. Maybe maybe you're the common denominator.
What do we say, boys? We break it and come right back?
I think so.
I think that's the best idea because this topic is very, very large, so we only have 20 seconds left on the clock. So we'll be back after this ad break.
Stay tuned.
We would like to thank Anchor for sponsoring and hosting the Life podcast. So who are Anchor and what do they do? Anchor is the all-in-one platform that gives you everything you need to make and publish your podcast. And best of all, it's all free. Anchor allows you to use their creative tools to record and edit your podcast. No need for any fancy professional equipment. Sounds amazing, right? And we haven't even gotten to the best part. Anchor isn't just a recording and editing platform. They're a publisher too. This means that Anchor takes care of all of the hard stuff, like publishing to Apple and Google Podcasts, so you don't have to. So what are you waiting for? Download the Anchor app today or go to anchor.fm to get started. Another thanks to Anchor for hosting, publishing, and sponsoring the Life podcast.
We on.
So bringing it back in to what we were saying before, let's bring it into the conversation we were having about during the break for like the Patreon subscribers who already saw this break. What about your neighbors, Tyler?
So we were talking about it, and Benji we ended the conversation. Benji started talking about like, what? Sorry, I'm losing my train of thought. What were you talking about? You know the formula that works to be able to train a dog. You know how it is, but we're not sure exactly how that's going to play out with humans until 20, 30 years down the road. Like how do you make a quote unquote good human, or at least a decent human being,
socially
decent,
acceptable or whatever.
And I said it's the same thing, and a lot of things that people miss, especially when it comes to raising children nowadays. I don't have any kids, but I'm sure 100% that this translates. I don't care what you think. Be like, oh, you don't have any kids, so you can't talk. There are two things that I do with my dog that were very important from day one. Mean what you say. When you say it, if it's a punishable offense, you define it and then you punish. And what was the other one?
Consistency.
And just be consistent about it. It's exactly it. You can't punish one time and then not punish the next. And it's that. And I had these neighbors behind my house. This lady, I mean, she had probably had like 2 or 3 kids. These kids were all under the age of probably 7, say. These kids were running around. I guess it must be like their grandparents' house. And this lady was screaming at the top of her lungs for like hours. I mean, but then she'd go back to regular conversation with whoever she's talking to. But the kids were running around having fun, not even like flinching at this lady. And she's, what the F did I just tell you? Get off of the swings! No, but seriously, I'm making this funny, but that's exactly how she was talking.
Yeah.
And I mean, it was like nonstop. I was in the backyard just listening to this lady, like, this lady is off her rocker. And these kids don't fear her at all. Yeah. And she just everything she screams. And I was like, wow, you know what? She's probably been screaming like this since day one out the gate and not followed through with half of the things that she says, or more than half of the things. So these kids see that as an empty promise. And be like, I can get away with whatever I want. I don't care how much you yell.
Absolutely.
It's true. We were talking about this concept of like, you can't incite what you don't have. If you do that for yourself, you're not going to do it for your kids.
Yep. You can't give what you don't have.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's like if you say to yourself, "Oh, I'm gonna save $30 to do this thing, whatever," and then you don't save the $30 and you don't do whatever, or you know, oh, I'm gonna do the laundry today, and then you don't do the laundry today. That's an internal thing that you have that you cannot instill in somebody else because children, again, don't have children nonetheless. Like you can observe, we see this. Okay,
I thought you were telling everybody not to have children.
No. I don't have children. Machine learning is the only interaction with children, which is based off of child learning that I have experience with. But the concept is you show something to a child, and it will learn more from the visual aspect of watching you do something than it will from the explanation. And that's the whole concept of it, where it's like, if you have an issue with self-control, your children are not going to be able to exhibit self-control. If you have a problem with fulfilling promises, your children are not going to be able to fulfill promises.
What's crazy when you said that, I think that the biggest thing that a kid does learn is the stuff that consistently happens.
Yes.
And it's from the person. It's not exactly what you say or what you do. It's the things that you do every day.
Yep.
You know, if you wake up every morning at the same time, the child will learn that time is the right time to wake up. Or if you consistently always cuss, the child will think that cussing is okay. It's the consistent things that always happen on day in and day out is what the child learns. Cussing on a random Tuesday once will not be detrimental to your kid's development. No.
Yeah.
But if you swear every single day around this kid, then now it's okay to swear. If it slips up and you're like, oh, and you correct it, it is what it is. But like these are it's the consistency. If you're consistently saying you're gonna do something and you don't get it done, and the child hears this. I don't have kids either, so all three of us don't have children. But
we're talking theory.
This is all theoretical stuff.
Thank
and
God.
sorry, guys.
Yeah.
Yeah. But it's the things that you do. I hope this makes sense to the parents also, because they might be listening to this like y'all don't even know. But it's the things that you consistently do. If you consistently say you're gonna do something, and the kid sees that you're not doing it, it thinks that it's okay to not do what you say.
Absolutely. Yeah. We might not have kids, but we can see the effects of this in society as a whole. People cry from the rooftops all the time, and they're like, oh, people in X society don't make it as far as people in Y society. Tyler and I are sons of businessmen. So we have learned just by watching people work how to be businessmen. That's just a developmental thing. If you live in a ghetto, and you watch people participate in gangs and sell drugs, the only things that you're going to learn are how to be a gang member and how to sell drugs.
I mean, technically, that's a businessman too.
Yes, I guess it is a businessman. But it's all. We had this conversation. I remember in 8th grade or 7th or 8th grade, we had a conversation about nature versus nurture. The idea that what affects you more, your developmental the genes that you are given from your parents, the hard-coded genetic information inside of you, or the environment that you were brought up in.
I think that's easy.
Yeah.
I mean, it's easy to see. It's
yeah.
like they have debates about pit bulls all the time. Or, I mean, whatever the flavor of dog it is. Like, just now it's pit bulls, but before it was Dobermans.
Yeah.
Before it was Rottweilers. Before that, it was even German Shepherds for a long time.
Someone has to have a bad rap.
Somebody has to have the bad rap. It's like, like pit bulls, they're just bloodthirsty killers. It's like, I'm pretty sure some of the nicest dogs I've ever met were pit bulls.
Yeah,
and
absolutely.
It's the same thing. It's all about how you're raised and in the context of what you've been through.
The environment that you're in will dictate where you're going. Period. And if it's a lot of us don't have a choice of what the environment is that we grow up in.
Nobody has a choice.
Well,
how until what age do you really have a choice?
Oh yeah, fair enough. Yeah.
Well, yeah, fair enough. Okay, so a lot of everyone doesn't have a choice of where you grow up as far as like the environment. So it's just like I lost my train of thought when you said that. I was like, oh.
No, it's legit. You probably only get like a real choice, and like the later the years go, the harder it is to be able to help somebody correct that toxic behavior or that toxic environment they grew up in. Once you get past 14, 15 years old, you can't fix and undo all that old stuff.
Absolutely.
Just on a
process.
On a whim, it would take a long time. It would take somebody who's very specialized, and it would take some really in-depth tools to be able to work somebody through that.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's tough, and it's a process, and it's like, and the thing is that unfortunately it doesn't stop when you're young, because you see it when you go into a new work environment. You go into a new work environment, you affect the work environment, and the work environment affects you.
Absolutely.
There have been times where I've been like, oh, I'm going to hang around with this new group of individuals. And you create this group of individuals that you start hanging around with. And then you start noticing that you start using the same turns of phrase as other people do. And you start using certain verbiage, and you start doing certain things, and you start, good or bad, by the way.
Cooked.
And it's like, you have been assimilated into this group of individuals. And it's like, oh, cooked, yeah, is an example. I thought you were just saying it like, oh, this person's cooked, and I was like, oh yeah, and it's like, no, that's just a turn. But it's so true. It's like we as humans are so influenceable. It's like we think that we're like these pillars of society, and then somebody comes and says a phrase one too many times, and then it's part of our vocabulary.
And then you're cooked.
Yeah, exactly.
One of the things that like I always try to do, and I do tell people whenever the moment is right, but like for me, because there is moments where I feel like meeting new people sometimes is a nervous thing for me. So one of the things that I do to help me, because of the environment, it's a lot different when you walk into someone's environment versus when they walk into your environment. There's a big difference on what's going to happen. So for one thing that I always love to do is to be the first person there, especially when I know I'm going to meet new people. Why? Because you set the environment at that point. You are in control, and they're coming into your environment.
True. And
when you don't show up first, they already created the environment. You're walking in, and now you have to adapt and try to figure out what's going on and try to be the best you as possible. But that's always one of the things that I try to do is be first, so that you can set the environment, because it's so powerful. Like an environment, it changes everything. You can control people's moods. If you're in a good mood and you set the environment, everyone coming into your environment will now have to meet that standard of a good mood. You have to be very clear about what environment you created. Don't be like shiesty about it, but be very upfront and happy, and people will eat that up. Yeah.
No, that's really good, Eric. That's really wise.
And there's an important thing. I agree. I think it's also very wise. I was like, jump right back in. No, but like the concept of I don't know if that's recording.
No, it just cooked itself.
Rip. The idea that these things are not deep, complex issues. These are things that affect our day-to-day lives every single day. You know, and it's like we're talking about them and we're looking at them, and that's what makes them interesting, and that's what makes them. We're bringing them to the top of your mind, and that's why some people say like that's some like deep stuff. Like why? Like not everybody works like that. What are you talking about? It's like these are things that affect our day-to-day lives and our day-to-day society, and we just don't notice them. And once we start noticing them, we can start playing with them, and we can start interacting with them, and we can use them to our advantage.
Like somebody could have criticism on what we were talking about this morning, talking about like, oh, you don't have kids, like how do you know? You only really know actually when you go through it. There's this powerful proverb that we actually read, and it starts with, it's like, I looked upon the vineyard of a lazy man, and I just observed what he was doing, and I beheld a big lesson just by looking at the outside mess. And it was like, oh, okay, like a little sleep, a little slumber, a little folding hands to rest, and your poverty will come on you real quick. I mean, that's in a nutshell. But
yeah.
Interestingly enough, speaking of the sweetbread, there is a Portuguese saying that's like, essa pessoa tem as mãos na massa. This person has their hands in the sweetbread dough.
Yeah.
And what that means is like you're actively participating in the thing you're doing, so you're not objectively looking at the things that are happening. And it's like, it means like you're already in it, so you're willing to give more and you're willing to make more mistakes because you've already started the process. And somebody who's outside can look in and say, you're doing something wrong. You know?
Yeah, it's way different in the process. Like it's easier to we used baseball last show, so we can use baseball again this year. I mean, not this year, this show.
Yeah. Once a year max.
No, but I mean, it's a lot different to be able to watch from the stands and say like, oh, that was a curveball or that was this, but it's a completely different thing when somebody's throwing a 90 mile an hour baseball at you. It's like
Absolutely.
I can't react to that like that.
Or even the concept of once you're in it, you're gonna do everything you can to finish.
Yeah.
You know, like I just a few weeks ago, I was working on the Jeep, and I was fixing a water pump and power steering pump. And if I would have known all the trouble that I was gonna go through before I started, I wouldn't have started. But because I didn't go through the trouble until my hands were in it, I had to finish. I had to go through it, and I had to get to the end process.
That's the 4.0 in that Jeep.
Yeah.
It wasn't that bad, guy.
I broke a bolt.
All right. So story of my life. That's why I don't work on my own cars anymore.
Yeah, fair enough. Yeah, I broke a bolt, and it just complicated everything.
Rip.
It was a 2-hour job turned into
Yeah, 2 hours turns into 2 days and $200 more than expected.
Yeah.
Ouch.
That's usually how it goes.
I had to finish it that day, so 2 hours turned into like a 9.5 hour
That's
job.
a bad hit.
Yeah,
it's a nice. Bad hit. Nonetheless, but like these are like once you start, you keep going, and that's like the endurance thing that we talked about a couple days. Oh, that was actually a different show. We talked about endurance, but not this show.
The one take,
yeah,
the one take, the one takes, which should be available soon. That show's gonna be a little ways away, but like that specific show, but those should be. I'm pointing at the camera that's not there. Those should be available soon for all of you who watch us on YouTube, on the Studio Web YouTube page and the Life Podcast YouTube page. But the concept of to go back to what we were talking just really quickly before we take a break, the idea that we only notice it from the outside. I do things that are not right because I'm a human and I was brought up in a way that not everybody agrees with. Just in general. Like you take they say 3 people, 4 opinions, you know, and there's going to be something about my life that certain people don't like. Does that make me wrong? Not necessarily. Does that make me right? Not necessarily. Yeah. But the idea is that we always think we're doing the best for ourselves, because if we didn't think that we were doing the best for ourselves, we wouldn't do it. It's like you've done a cost-benefit analysis. We talk about smoking. Smoking's bad for you. Everybody knows smoking's bad for you. People still smoke. Why do they smoke? Because they like the effect of smoking more than they care about the effect that it's going to have on their lives. It's like that's what we're doing with our mental health. That's what we're doing with the ways that we interact with people. That's the way that we're doing like our personality. And convincing you that you're wrong is not going to work. We're never going to convince you that you're a bad person and that you should change. You have to see the effects of the way that you live your life and change your personality based off of the effects that you receive.
Rounding this out, now that you were just saying that, it's very wise, and this is a good nugget once your eyes are open, when you can be able to look upon somebody's situation and actually objectively observe and learn from their mistakes. That's a really good place. And as you're growing or attaining your group of friends, make sure that your 5 closest people can speak into your life, to be able to look at your situations and give you objective results from people who actually conduct their lives well.
Yeah,
so it's like, okay, I have you guys in the studio right now. I would love it if you said like, hey, like, you know, you're screwing up here, or hey, what's going on with this situation? Yeah. Because I trust your advice because you conduct your lives well.
Yeah,
and I would hope it'd be vice versa too, where you would consider the things I would say.
You don't want to be the biggest fish in the pond.
No.
You know, and you have to always be in a learning environment. And I don't mean like people like can hurt you because everyone around you is bigger than you. I mean, people's lives around you are in the direction that you want to go. Yep. And you want to learn from them so that you can become the bigger fish and then keep growing. You never want to outgrow your fish tank. You have to keep on expanding. And those the 5 closest people in your life, those are going to change throughout your life. They're not meant to stay the same. They're going to grow and develop with you. And you're going to add and remove people. You're going to learn. You're going to meet new mentors. And it's going to be... There's a lot to it, but I think the 5 closest people in your life is the biggest influence in your life after, like, when you actually grow out of your, you know, childhood family house and stuff. Yeah.
Just to say this before we take a break, I heard a quote from someone a little while ago that said, "If you're the smartest person in the room, you're in the wrong room."
Absolutely.
And that's like
that
something.
Mark Zuckerberg?
It was one of them. It was one of those guys. He's like, if you're the smartest person in the room, you're in the wrong room. Find a room where you can grow, and then max out that room, and then move to a different room. And that's the way that we should live our lives.
We'll be back.
Stay tuned.
This was on the other show.
So on the other show, like, we would have notes, and it would be nice and loose, and we would have points that we were working towards. But I mean, you had room to talk about whatever you wanted in between. And sometimes there were days where we didn't really roll in much of anything at all. It's like, okay, well, let's see what happens here. We'll see.
There was that show was a lot of that was an exercise in just going with the flow of that whole thing, because it was like we had week-long topics at the beginning, and then we did daily topics, which was interesting.
Well, we tried week to keep the week.
Oh no,
the
it
same.
was the other way. It was the other way around. We started daily topics, and then we moved into week-long topics. There was times we had like 4 or 5 pages of notes, and there were days that we were like, I have no idea. We just turned on the mics and went live, and we were like, hey, what's up? Like that.
We'll see.
It was awesome. That was a great show. I loved that show.
Yeah, it was definitely an exercise of trust, and there was trusting in a lot of different variables and aspects. But there was also this thing, like, if we made a week-long topic, it would push us and it would grind us to be able to get a week sometimes out of those certain things. And we'd have to meditate and mull upon it just to be able to really, like, get the extent of it instead of pick all the low-hanging fruit and move on.
Yeah, I feel that. So for anyone who's listening, if you guys want us to do any live events, like live streaming or anything like that, you guys have to tell us. You can go ahead and email us at thelifepodcastshow@gmail.com. If you put the pressure on us, it'll give us the encouragement we need to get that ball rolling. But because no one's asking, we're not putting the foot on the gas there.
I want to do live shows. I think that'll be great.
Yeah.
It's just it's a process to get everything set up.
But if y'all really want it, you guys can make it happen.
Yeah, absolutely.
Oh, so we were talking now, just in context. I mean, this conversation we had as a show today, it was completely spontaneous. We started with the sweetbread story, and then it was whatever happened.
Yeah, exactly. And that was good too. I mean, it's a funny story too, because I never even realized until today how weird that is.
Yeah.
Like the sweetbread and egg in the middle. Like it's one thing if you had it on the side. It's like right in the middle. It's just like, here you go, in the bag.
It is. It was really weird because it's like this guy's like just like the normal like Southern dude, and he's like, oh yeah, my wife got this bread from our neighbors, and there was an egg in it, and then all of us were like, what?
So?
Yeah, it's like and
That's how bread's made.
He's like, that was the punchline. There was an egg in it.
yeah. the
Yeah?
the thing that got me
And
was
then what
cutting
happened?
it. I don't understand how you cut it and don't notice that there's an egg in there.
I mean, I guess if it was uncooked, they would realize real quick.
Fair, good point.
But
This
yeah,
bread is runny.
It's like over easy, but like pre-done. Like it's like pre-assembled eggs over easy. With the bread. That'd be bad.
Anywho, anybody
That's an episode of the cooking show.
pre-assembled over easy eggs.
Yeah.
all right. So to kind of get back on track here, we're talking about like your past kind of. The environment you grew up in, and it develops who you are as a person, and becoming aware of your good qualities and your not so great qualities, and once you become aware of those things, that's when you can start to change those things. If you find like that, I don't know, people don't like to be around you, something simple like that, like you don't like people tend to like not want to spend a lot of time with you, or you just have bad money habits, or like a lot of this stuff, it's like it's not genetic. It's stuff that you grew up in, and like if your parents were never good with money, the chances are that you won't learn good money spending habits or good money saving habits. That you'll have to fumble across that in your adult years and go through a lot of money spending habits.
Yeah, you gotta-
before you can.
You got to learn the hard way. Well, because there are some people. I mean, like their parents' example just didn't stick, and it's like, okay, well, it's a lack of self-control.
Mm-hmm.
It's really what it is. It's like, okay,
Yeah.
well, I was showed the right way, but I didn't apply the right way, and now I taste the fruits of my own way.
Mm-hmm.
It's that, and it's also could be the idea. I know of somebody who, her and her sisters, their parents were very militaristic,
On blast.
and I don't know. You don't know these people, I don't think.
But now they're on
Oh,
blast.
now they're on play. Yeah.
Yeah, fair enough.
I was like, what? I was like, I'm not calling anyone out. Nonetheless,
Well, they're people you know.
yeah, fair enough.
They're
yeah,
on blast.
I don't know if they're. Oh, nonetheless, their parents were very militaristic, and because of that, it incited them to just go completely against everything that they stood for.
Yeah.
You know, so it's like if your parents are super strict with money, there's two ways that comes out. It's either your child is super strict with money, or your child's gonna blow every single dollar that they possibly can. Like
Yeah.
it's like.
Yeah, you're completely right. A lot of like, and I think that's just us being like children and wanting to rebel
Yeah.
against the authority. But
But that affects our lives.
Yeah.
yeah, absolutely.
I would have been that guy too, especially like I know plenty of people. Like I tell this person all the time. Like if I had your parents would have been cooked a long time ago. I would have broke your parents because of that. No, but it's yeah, exactly. It's like they're I don't want to say controlling, but they're so like just nervous and overarching and so involved. It's like if you have your hands in my masa and I'm trying to make masa over here, I'm gonna break your fingers. Like
Yeah.
if you're gonna ask me to do something, let me do it. Or you tell me you can't do this, that is number one bet. I will do it.
Yeah.
Or
Fair
that was me as a
absolutely.
kid.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's funny because like, if you were to be grown up in that family, you'd be a completely different person. You know, if you were like, chances are you wouldn't be the person that like is the first person to do something. What's that word when initiative? You wouldn't have the initiative to do things first because the people that raised you always stopped you from being the first person to do things first. You know, so you wouldn't have that mentality of like, I need to hop in and get this done.
You raised me at 12. You adopt me at 12. I'm sorry, your family is gonna get soaked.
Adopting if they're not
Yeah.
like an infant is your own. That's your own risk of life.
Yeah.
Adopting a 12-year-old, good luck.
That's a test and a half. Whoever did, like, if you can do that, like,
Good for you.
a
We
guy
need
who
more
screams,
like you.
guy who screams at the pawn shop or screamed at the pawn shop, foster parent, amazing dude. Like overall, just an awesome dude. He took in like so many kids like as a foster parent.
Wow.
Oh, such a great dude.
That's so hard. I don't know if I could foster like that. Cause like if
I
you
couldn't.
have somebody and you pour and invest into them, like
Yeah.
it's not like you can just like get that was your kid.
Yeah.
Mhm.
How do you just get rid of that in the time?
He kept so many of them. He's like, he adopted so many kids. He's like, I can't foster babies anymore because he keeps all of them. He's like, he's just a loving dude, and that's a special type of person.
We need more people like that.
You know, and it's like, he's a great example. Like, we play around with him and he screams a lot and whatever, but he's a good example as a father figure to a lot of different people, especially when it's like, you don't have a father figure, like you're an orphan and you get taken in by somebody like that, and that's such a solid example of a person, and it's like, that's a test that I don't think I could pass. Like, that's a hard test to go through.
I think that's a great entry to what or a segue is, like, just because you have some bad habits does not mean that you're not an amazing person.
Yes.
So like, you're listening to this and you might be like, man, I need to fix it. Like, I'm a mess. Like, no, you're still an amazing person and you are unique to who you are. But we all have something that we need to work on. Even me, like, I've got things that I'm actively trying to figure out and work on. There are things like traumas from when I was a child that I don't understand that affect me today. But this is a part of life. This is why we talk about it. We're talking about it like we're not walking through it. No, we've us three, I mean, I'm speaking to myself, I fixed a lot of habits, but I still have a ton of habits to fix.
Talk about it.
Absolutely.
And like, we're not better than anyone, but just because you have some bad habits, just because you talk loud at the pawn shop and you just scream all the time, does not mean that you're a bad person, because what we don't see is the fact, I had no idea that he was a foster parent of multiple, like, that's an incredible feat. And a lot of us don't see that side of it. We just see like, oh, that's just a loud guy. He must be doing drugs or something, you know? And so we just judge on first appearance, and I just want to tell you that just because you have some bad habits that are evident and they're like loud and you can't hide them, that doesn't mean that you're a bad person. It just means that you have some challenges that you can overcome.
And side note, well, none of us are parents, and I know that being a parent is a very difficult thing, but a lot of people I've spoken to over time, and they're like, oh, I'm afraid to be a parent because I'm not sure that I could be a good parent. And I'd like to make it clear that because we talked about all these social things and whatever, you know, it's not, no one's perfect, like Eric just said. Nobody's perfect. You do the best that you can. You figure out what things that you're affecting in your life and you work to fix them. And just showing that to a child shows them that the goal in life is to always improve. Again, we're talking out of a place of like a theory. But if you're afraid to have a kid just because of the idea of how I'm going to raise the kid, like, okay, if you can't afford a kid, not the best idea. If you don't think that you live in a social economic environment that's good for a kid, okay, I understand. But like, if your only qualm about having a child is, I don't know how I'm going to raise them, understand that being a parent is not an exact science. It's improving the things that you can improve and working to fix the things that you can fix.
Absolutely. And you say like raising a child, I just think like, if I would like, I mean, I'm very thankful it never happened, but if I were to have a child when I was younger, like even 10 years ago, I would have raised it so much differently.
Absolutely.
You know, so that child, like that is even though I'm the same person, you know, I would have raised a different child depending on when I had them. You know, so if I would have had it at 17, that child, I can't say would be probably the best habits instilled in them, and they would be 10 years old today. So this would be like really instilled habits at this point. But versus if I had a child today, I feel much more confident that I would have it wouldn't be easier, but I would instill better habits because I learned better habits over the 10 years. I learned who I was during that time versus instead of raising somebody while I'm learning who I am. But like, a lot of people do have children at a younger age, and it's unfortunate sometimes, but it is a blessing at the same time.
It's gonna be a lot harder.
There is challenges to it, but it's never too late. You can start instilling those good habits.
Absolutely.
You know, you could. This is the time to change. If they are 10 years old, yes, it's going to be difficult to change the habits that you've instilled in them for the last 10 years, but it's not impossible. And there's always a way to do that. So you just have to be consistent. It's the consistency that really that's what pours through in anything. It pours through in your business. It pours through in your personal life. If you're consistently if you consistently do something, that's when it becomes a regular thing.
Well, we talk about it. That's really what character is. It's like you can put on a face to have good habits, but then like it's that consistent choice of making good decisions or having good habits all the time. It's like, okay, well, the person that I'm perpetuating myself to be is who I am actually every single day. That's how that gets built. And that's the thing. You were talking about like raising kids and having not being perfect, but striving to be the best. It's never. It really is never too late, and it's that environment that you're gonna raise a kid. It's like, okay, well, I have some problems now. First, if you're gonna have a kid, make sure that the life that you're at least leaning towards and working towards is going to be that healthy life that you know your kid will thrive and survive in, rather than like I'm living off of peanut butter and jelly sandwiches and welfare just because like that's what it is, and I don't have a complete house. Like, let me just go out and shack up with some random dude and have a kid. Like, that's not gonna benefit anybody. But if you have a stable household and the framework of your life is consistent, you'll know that you'll have at least the right guardrails to be able to bring that kid up in the right ways.
And it's important. There's 2 points that I'd like to make here. It's important to realize that the child is not the first step. You're the first step.
Absolutely.
This is in friendships, in
But the
relationships.
kid won't do what I say.
Exactly. It's because you're not doing what you're saying. That's the tough part. No, and this isn't to make anyone feel better. This isn't to make it. This is, we have to be good people to ourselves before we can be good people to other people.
Well, that was the key hinge, and I'm glad we'll be able to make a graphic out of this. But you can't give what you don't have, and you can't reproduce what you're not. I mean, like a dog reproduces another dog. You can't have like 2 dogs mate and have a zebra come out. It doesn't. It doesn't work.
Doesn't happen.
It's the same with you. Whatever you reproduce, whether it be physically, spiritually, that's what you're going to be, or that's what that other thing is going to be.
And a side note, this I heard this by our friend Chris Valentin, and I was shocked by this statistic. This generation the past few generations are the most fatherless nation that didn't have a war going on. So Vietnam and Korea, there were higher rates of fatherlessness because they went to war and people died. We are the largest fatherless generation without a war. Meaning that people, and this is a really core concept, and this is not just parents, this is every single person. We have to accept the effects of our decisions. We've made decisions in the past that affect our future, and we have to live with the consequences of those actions. And we cannot offset our decisions onto other people. Other people are not responsible for our decisions as a human. It's tough, it's difficult, it's expensive, but it was our decision to make, and now we have to live with the decisions that we have made.
So we'll say it, that one night stand that you went off and decided to do that translates into now a kid without a father, all of the negative effects, or I would say at least 75% or more, fall onto that kid, not you.
Absolutely.
Because of your decision.
And it's like, and the example, the excuse that everybody says is like, it'll ruin my life. And it's like, by not accepting the consequences of your decisions, you're not only ruining your life, you're ruining the life of somebody else. And that's a very dangerous position to be in.
Thank you for listening to the Life Podcast Show. We really appreciate all your support. We meet every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday morning just to talk and share our perspectives on everyday life situations. If you haven't already, please share this with your friends and give them a chance to join the conversation. Also, if you liked what you heard today, rate our podcast. The higher the rating, the longer we can keep this going. And a special thanks to our future sponsors that will soon partner with us on this journey. If anyone would like to contact us, please email us at thelifepodcastshow@gmail.com. One word. That's thelifepodcastshow@gmail.com. Be blessed and have a wonderful day.